Welcome to Lost Without Japan, a travel podcast about the life-changing experiences of exploring Japan and those moments we would be lost without. For your listening pleasure, allow me to introduce your very own Kanko Guido, Michael.
Welcome to a special Lost Without Moments bonus interview episode of the Lost Without Japan podcast. Our bi weekly podcast is focused on getting you to Japan for your first visit or making your next adventure even better than your last. Today's special interview episode is with Justin Billet, a friend of mine who is a fellow fan of Japan and our show and has a unique experience to share about Japan. As we geek out about Japan, Hanshin Tiger baseball, travel, and just discuss various trips to Japan that he has had. This is your Kanko Guido for TKIC Studio Productions, coming to you with hope and dreams of your first trip to Japan or your next visit to end up happening sooner rather than later. Just as I hope that my return to Japan for my daughter's first trip will be too. I'm tapping out on bills and scratching those lotto tickets. But I'd like to thank you all for giving us a bit of your time today, and I truly hope that this podcast finds you in a good place or on the path to a better one, no matter how it may seem at this moment. My belief is we could all use a beacon like this one in our lives to help guide us during these times. And my hope is that Japan, along with this show, will become that for you. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're returning, lost without listener, thank you again for your time once more and returning. For today's show, let me introduce Justin Billet.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me. Glad to be here. It's been listening to you for a while, so this is fun opportunity. Thanks.
No, hey, I truly, like I said, I feel fortunate to have you join us today and the listeners because one of the things that I enjoy the most is sharing things that I haven't experienced myself and that a lot of other people have not experienced else. And we're going to give that today. We're going to give that today. Before we get going for today's episode, do you have any socials that you'd like to share if someone that's listening to the show, like yourself, has any questions or things about your various adventures to Japan, my friend?
Yeah, sure. Nothing real exciting. I don't have anything to push or any product or cool side projects that are going on. Just kind of doing my thing. But my social is I'm on Instagram just under my name, so super easy. Just Justin Billet, Billet. There's no spaces or anything in it. So if you want to see a guy make dad jokes,
That's why we get along because we're a part of those reasons. The Japan and the dad jokes can't go wrong with any of that. My friend. It's like, well, Justin, one of the first things I like to do is just give a chance for you to share about yourself. Anything that you'd like to give into that info, my friend, a Japan interest, whatever it is. This portion of the show is kind of for you, just to let the audience kind of get to know you, my friend.
cool. Yeah. Well, I grew up in a small town in South Dakota. So, Japan was one of those things that I think probably for anybody in our age group always felt super far away and super mysterious. So, I guess that's the relevancy of mentioning that. I'm currently living in Kansas City. I work as a creative director at an ad agency, and I've been doing the reserves thing in the military for about over 25 years now. So that is actually what took me on the first trip, and we'll talk about that here, I guess, in a little bit.
I love it, my friend. I love it. And I was like, it's always interesting to see how people end up getting there. I mean, for me, it was my dad's trip to Japan back before we could interweb and see what it was like, and just the stories and pictures that he ended up bringing back that kind of sparked that interest in me. Did you have an interest? And like you said, kind of like it is like for people in our our demographics, it's kind of one of those things that always seemed intriguing, like kind of far away. I'm mysterious. Was there any like particular thing that kind of popped out to you that was like a moment that you had or something that you were into about Japan?
Not really. Like you said, I think growing up in the US for whatever reason, well, I mean, obviously we could sit here and talk about the obvious reasons, but, Japan is always on the periphery, right? The pop culture, the anime, the manga, all that stuff always kind of exists. Just growing up in the 80s, there was all the Karate Kid movies, you know, Mr. Miyagi and living in Okinawa, and there were these just awful, probably by today's standards, and really even by then standards, these awful, cheesy movies called American Ninja. It was about some guy named Joe who, grew up in Japan and learned ninjutsu from his adoptive Japanese father. And, I was geeky about those as a kid. And there's this Nintendo game called River City Ransom,
Yes, yeah, it was a great game.
which, I still have the original cartridge in the box because that game, I think, probably helped nurse my, love affair with, like, I gotta get to this place someday and just, see what it's about. And I never really have had, like, a specific, like, I need to go see X, Y, and Z. It's always just been like I need to just get to this place and kinda sit in it and see what's going on. So,
I love it, my friend. Love it, love it. Let's see here. Man, you talk about that. My sister and I, we've been off topic here, which we love to do in the show. My sister borrowed, I'm going to put that in air quotes that people can't see in the audience, borrowed my Sega Genesis for the past, I don't know, 30 something years. So they're finally getting it back to me. And one of my games that I love to play was like the Pirates, the Pirates game that they had, and there's a couple others. And it's like you talking you know, like the River City Ransom, man, that was like a blast to pass. I don't know how many hours I had in that. Don't have my box of that, but I still have my Genesis, still have, a couple of my cartridges of things. Yeah, that's good. Cyberpunk for me, like like the one, like not Cyberpunk, but Shadowrun
hmm.
was another kind of like in that style. Just so many good things, my friend. But this is about you. So
Oh,
oh,
yeah, no, yeah, we could go on and on about, River City Ransom. If there's any gamers out there that listen to this and like the old retro beat 'em ups, it's definitely worth checking out.
so good. What makes Japan for you a place that you could like if you could visit yearly?
Oh, gosh. There's so much, right? Like I was kind of alluding to with just kinda wanting to be there. It's this idea that it's so familiar to our culture as Americans. It's simultaneously very Western, but also very Eastern, and so there's this mysteriousness to it, but there's this familiarity to it where it's just kind of this interesting sort of fish out of water aspect to it. And I'm the type of person, I love going someplace and kind of getting lost. Like
Sure.
the more lost I am, the more happy I am, I guess, just in terms of like, oh, there's something waiting just around this corner to be discovered, and some fun experience that I'll remember forever. That's kind of that high level aspect of it. Geographically, it's appealing to me just because mountains, rivers, forests, all that stuff is just kind of, not to sound overly cheesy, but I think of it as being like where my soul lives, which is a weird thing for a
Right.
guy who lives in the Midwest to say because it's flat as a pancake, and I don't have any of that. Yeah, the food, the high quality but inexpensive food, and I think for me, after having been there, probably the number one thing would be the people.
Yeah.
They're so warm, they're so welcoming. As long as you go and try to approach the place with a little bit of respect, and you're not doing the ugly tourist thing. I've just never ever had, in the few trips that I've been there, have never had a bad interaction with any of the people there.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree, my friend. And smile when you say that because like the most religious experience that I've had in my life was, in Kyoto during fall, in a Shinto shrine, out looking, over all the leaves and things that changed and like that sensation. And Hiroshima for me, and again, halfway around the world, is the closest that I've felt to home because I just traveled so much, not traveled so much, but like moved so much as a kid. We were never in a place for more than a year, year and a half. So I didn't really have that, like, this is home for me. But every time I go back to Hiroshima, I'm like, yeah, this is, where I feel like you belong. So yeah, I get that, my friend. I get that. What are some of your favorite locations you'd enjoy visiting outside of like the main cities of Osaka, Tokyo, and Kyoto?
I haven't been enough to have like a super expansive list, right? So to anybody listening, this is by no means exhaustive, but on a few of my subsequent trips, not this initial Air Force one that I think we were going to talk about today, the couple of the places I've been to are Nagano, Matsumoto, which is right there near Nagano, Kanazawa, Shirakawago, which is a tiny little, like the old Gasho hut style village. It's, I believe, a World Heritage Site, so it's pretty touristy in terms of like, it's not like it's some secret or anything, right? But it's still very cool. And then Nara, like
Yeah.
I absolutely like Nara with the deer park. You'll probably discover as we talk more. I'm kind of a big dork about animals,
Yeah.
so yeah, getting to go there and feed the deer was really cool.
That's it. My daughter and I, that's part of like where we're looking at the different islands outside of like Hiroshima, like we were talking before, we recorded like Megajima and a couple others. They have, a cat population to them. And that's one of the things that my daughter's most excited about is like you can go to a cafe that's a cat cafe, but it's not a cat cafe in being that they're forced to live there. They just are there.
They just
Uh,
wander in. Yeah.
oh yeah, they're like, yeah, we're going. I'm like, yeah, honey, I got this for you.
Mhm. Yeah,
What
100%.
it's like you just have to. What is some of the just like within your Osaka, Tokyo, Kyoto, to those main places, that people end up to? What are some of your favorites? Things that you did in one of those, any of those that you'd like to talk about, my friend?
Uh, Along that main golden route, so, I mean, on my first trip in Tokyo, one of the cooler temples that I found, was actually recommended to me by one of the Japanese self-defense force guys, and he had kinda pointed myself and a friend to this temple saying, like, "If you wanna go see a really beautiful temple that's not super touristy, this is the one to go see." And it is a temple called Yasukuna Jinji.
Okay.
It's right near the Imperial Palace, so, you know, automatically you would think, well, surely that's gonna be crawling in people. Maybe under normal circumstances it would be. When I went with the Air Force to work the air show, it was in 2022, and so tourism had not opened back up yet. Uh, you had to have a working reason to be coming to Japan if you were gonna go there because of COVID, and so everything was probably a lot quieter than what it normally would be. So we got to this temple, and it was, the temple grounds themselves were beautiful. Obviously, with it being right near the Imperial Palace, it is probably has more money put into its development and upkeep than maybe what some other temples do. Um, and unbeknownst to us when we went there, it's surrounded by like three schools. And I think
Right.
of every grade. I think there's a grade school, a middle school, and a high school. And we got there pretty much right as the grade school was letting out. So, as we were walking the pathway underneath the torii gates to get to the temple itself, there was just herds of the stereotypical Japanese school children in their school uniforms, excitedly running to, get out of school and go home and play for the day or whatever. And it was just very picturesque. And so I think maybe more than the temple itself, even though the temple is absolutely worth seeing, it's beautiful. It was the experience that I
Yeah.
kind of had at that temple that made me go, "Oh yeah, this place is great." So yeah, as far as like places within Tokyo go, that's probably up there with my favorite. And like I said, there's definitely a memory appeal there for me.
Yeah. I love it, my friend. What are some of your favorite foods or places that like kind of a go-to for you for a meal or snack in Japan?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we could have an entire episode or several about just konbinis, right? And we could get contentious about which one's the best. Um, I might be uh, to put myself on a pedestal for a second, potentially. And maybe I'd be a little bit interested in the sense that I'm vegetarian, and so um, I self-restrict on my diet there, and it's vegetarianism, veganism is a little bit less common there,
Yeah.
so it can be a little bit tricky. Luckily for me, I love ramen, and any ramen shop is probably gonna have a vegetarian option, and ramen is, I mean, you've been,
Yeah.
get a bowl. bowl bigger than your head, and it costs you maybe $4 US. So, I mean, the quantity and quality of the food you're getting for the price point is hard to beat. And then it's just something I like anyways, so that helps. And there's so many little like ramen hole in the wall places that um are just locally owned mom and pop type things that again is the exact type of vibe that I like. It's like it feels local, it feels like an intimate experience. I'm just sitting someplace kind of, facing the kitchen or whatever, depending on what the layout of the place is. Um Sort of like that. Okonomiyaki, it took me until my 3rd trip to finally get that, because it's not I mean, I say this as, somebody who's probably pretty ignorant, but it's not super readily available, and not easy to find in Tokyo. I
Yeah.
think it's kind of a regional thing. So but that is, for anybody who doesn't know, kind of like a savory style pancake. It's got like, scallions, onions. The one I had potatoes in it, and then it's kind of all baked into like a potato batter. They can come with meat if you're not a vegetarian like me, so don't write them off just because some sissy man is telling you it only has veggies in it. Japanese curry.
Oh, yeah.
Before my first trip, I was not a curry fan. I don't like Indian curry. I don't like green curries. And Japanese curry opened me up to a whole new world of, oh, okay. And I probably didn't even like the first one I had probably wasn't even that good because it was literally just at like is it Coco
Cocoa
Ikiban?
curry. Yeah, yeah,
Coco
the cocoa
curry.
curry.
Yeah. It was just at a Coco curry underneath a train station. So it was like, it was like my at the time, again, first trip, my commander took me there. He's like, hey, you want to try this curry place? And it wasn't really my thing, but I was like, I wasn't gonna say no. I was like, "Yeah, if that's what you want, we can do it." And I'm glad I said yes to it because now Japanese curry is pretty regularly on the menu at my household. My son and I will cook it up for dinner.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of that same, like, you go to have that for the first time, and it's like, yeah, 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 yeah. Said it can be a religious experience, my friend,
Yeah,
and I
it's
gotta
very
say, for the veggie and vegan options, when you find that, I gotta say, just for a lot of meals that you can have at restaurants in Japan, like when I was going early on, there was no organic labeling, but it was organic. It's like what we'd label here. Now, when you go, you can find some labeling and things like that. But I remember going and like everything seemed to come from like the farmer that was nearest to, whatever place was serving you your food. And just that alone, just as far as flavors, freshness, and everything, put a lot of meals that were just like, instead of just, you know, ending up somewhere like here that could be hit or miss, it was like everything was just like kind of like that, yeah, like, "Oh, this is good. This is good too." So, yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that, like that, my friend. What are some location. So I know we're gonna be talking about your time, for your visit and things like that for our air show and things coming up here in just a moment. But what are some places that you haven't visited yet that are like, when I go back, they're kind of like at the top of your list that you want to see?
yeah. Oh god, so many. I mean, I want to see all of Japan. I need to see every prefecture,
Yeah.
you know, because that's obviously a very broad answer. We'll just throw that to the side for a second. I definitely would like at some point to get to Hokkaido, just northern Japan, just because my perception of it is that the vibe there is totally different. And obviously, like the snow and that kind of stuff. Like I said, I like snow, mountains, forests, that kind of stuff resonates with me. Honestly, for no other reason than I hear people talking about it all the time. I feel like I need to check out Fukuoka. And then for me personally, like one of the things that's on my bucket list that'll probably be you know, Justin has to go do this on his own type of trip is the Nakasendo Trail.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really I have a life goal of like I want to go and I want to hike the Nakasendo Trail, which is actually why I'm trying to learn Japanese, just because I figure it's going to be remote enough that just English in and of itself probably isn't going to get me by as comfortably, at least, as
Yes.
if I know some Japanese.
My friend, I could not agree enough. Like all the different trails and things like that are part of it too. Like, past people I've interviewed, that like everyone has a connection to that and ends up being something they do multiple times. If it's hiking you know, a mountain, if it's, like doing a religious experience as far as like, be it part of your religion or not, that ends up being part of these trails. Yeah, you're totally down, my friend. Totally down for that. What is if you have a travel hack that you'd like to share for someone traveling to Japan? What would that be, my friend?
Yeah. I don't really have one. There's so many travel influencers out there now, and people who obviously plan trips professionally that they probably have a lot better advice than what would have in terms of like anything that's actually logistical advice, right? I guess in saying that, like one of the things that I would say right off the top of my head without, and it took me too long to realize this, is just how much of a cash-based society it is. um, I'd put, I have this American mindset, right, where you don't ever want to carry too much cash around just because you could lose it. It's not even that I'm worried about somebody stealing it from me, but just, I drop my wallet or, it falls out of my pocket or whatever. And oh crap, now I'm out, 30,000 yen. Um, but it's so like the culture there is so safe that like one, I never had any issue dropping anything, but if you do, people are gonna chase you down and make sure you get it back. But I'm going down a rabbit hole. The point is like it was surprising to me, and it took me too long to like let the lesson sink in that there are still a lot of like mom and pop places that it is cash and that's the
Yeah,
only way to pay. And so if you're thinking you can get by on plastic and just using like your debit card or whatever, like you could here in the US or wherever you happen to be, that's maybe a Western culture that operates the same way. It'll do you good to have some cash on hand. And then, other than that, like I would just say, like I just said about travel influencers, it's touristy things are touristy for a reason. They're great.
100%. Yeah,
They're like Kyoto is beautiful. If you want to go to Kyoto, you should go to Kyoto. There is so much there to see, and it is such a beautiful place. And if you want to go to Tokyo to experience that kind of, as Maurice would put it, that like cyberpunk neon type of vibe, like you should do that, right? It's if that's what appeals to you. But, there's so much to see and do that if your thing is like, I just want to go walk trails, like
yeah,
go walk trails, have your trip. Don't worry about having somebody else's. Because you will find something that the country is just full of little, I guess, like magical touch points, for lack of a
yeah,
better thing to call them, where
yeah,
it's like they're just they're so in tune with like trying to make everything sort of feel like an experience that like you're gonna get someplace and it's like, oh, I didn't expect to see, you know, this village of 200, 200 people to have like its own mascot or, whatever the case may be, right? And so there's always something to discover. And to that point, like leave time in your schedule, right? Like don't overschedule. I used to be very guilty of this, and I kind of figured out after enough like just travel in general that it's like, yeah, if I put five things on my agenda for the day, I don't have time to like if I walk past an alleyway and I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. I don't have time to get to it now. And then I feel like I missed out on something.
yeah,
So I try not to overload my schedule. One event in the morning, one event in the afternoon, maybe that is, not going to take anywhere near that amount of time. And then that leaves me time to, like I said, just kind of walk around, discover some other things in the area. If there's a shop I want to stop into, if I see a little local coffee shop that I can stop and just sort of relax there. When I went with my daughter, it left me time to, it left us time for her to be able to see things and like,
yeah.
if she wanted to pop in and like grab a souvenir or something like that. We didn't have to be like, oh no, we're gonna miss our bus. Like we got to get going. So
No, I like it, my friend. Now, I know we've kind of talked a lot about yourself, some different things in Japan, and I think it's about time. We can get to talk, you know, about your first trip and how you were able to get there as a result. Because, like I said, I really feel it's not an experience that many of our listeners have gotten, been able to have. And for on one side of my family, there's a lot of them that are all military based, in their careers. And I was like one of that first where I was like, I went into teaching and get a hard time from it sometimes. But if you could share about that, my friend, I'd love to hear. And I know that people listening would too as well.
yeah, well, I will tell you right up front that having done one but not the other, teaching is probably the harder job. So respect to you for that. Yeah. So like I kind of alluded to up front, been in the military for 25 years. Probably like most people joined to pay for school, and if you start doing the math on when I say 25 years, obviously there were certain world events that kind of threw a wrench in that. Ended up on active duty for about 5 years, which was good for me because it, sort of changed, I guess, the way I look at what I wanna do with my life and,
Yeah.
what can I do in terms of, like, work that would make me happy and, not make me feel like I'm just, I don't know, wasting my time, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, uh, fast forward, having been in the military, like I said, 25 years, at one point, several years ago now, obviously at this point, in the reserves, we do, our annual training. You hear all the commercials, right? A weekend a month, 2 weeks a year type of thing. And so we were going to do our 2 weeks a year. And the commander that we had at the time had actually been stationed for a while at Yokota Air Force Base, which is in Tokyo. And so he was aware of this air show that they have there called the Friendship Festival. And had kind of floated that as an idea for this 2 week training opportunity for us to go in. And so the career field I was in at the time was military police. And so, there was this linkage to like, oh, we'd get like hands-on experience of actually being able to, work within large crowds, and do that kind of stuff. And so we went for that reason to work at the air show, help out the normal base personnel, kind of plus up the manning so that when the air show started, they would have enough people to work this thing. Because the air show, the Yokota Friendship Festival, um, it's this annual event. It had been shut down for several years because of COVID. So this was going to be the first year in several years that it had reopened. So they were expecting a larger crowd. Um, and this air show celebrates U.S. Japan relations, and with the intent of strengthening, the bond with the local community. And like I said, the base opens up to the public, and we had about 140,000 local Japanese populace come onto the base, and I mean it's really cool. It's obviously all those people coming on, they're excited to be there to see the aircraft, like the ones that are sitting on the ramp, just that they can kind of get up close to and look at. Obviously, the ones that are flying around. There's live music, there's food, there's vendors. It's a 2-day event, so the first day, Saturday at night before the show closes for the night, there's a big fireworks display. So it's a really big event. It draws in a lot of locals. They are obviously excited to be there. We're excited to have them, especially again, like I said, if you've been to Japan and know anything about the people, they're just so lovely that it's even when you're like, okay, we got to make sure they don't go anywhere they're not supposed to. They don't really want to. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're such a polite, I almost hate saying this kind of stuff because it feels very stereotypical, but they are such a polite and rule-bound society that it's like, you don't really like, I'm here to work, but I don't really even feel like I'm working. I'm just hanging out. Let's go get a hot dog. And it was a very cool experience. Very cool. The people were all super friendly, very excited to see American service members. There was almost like a quasi celebrity status to it. So at the time, my position was first sergeant, which in the Air Force basically means you're kind of the right hand of the commander. I won't belabor that too much. People can look it up and decide for themselves what it means. But basically, it meant that I was walking around with the commander all day. And obviously, he's both wearing our berets, and his has the fancy brass on it because he's an officer. And so, he sticks out even more. The locals were very excited to try and get pictures with all of us because in the Air Force, we are the only ones as the security forces slash military police. We're the only ones that like regularly carry weapons around. So we really look the part.
Yeah.
And they wanted pictures with us. And so you'd watch, like you'd be walking around and you'd see somebody kind of looking at you and like maybe they were talking to whoever they were with, and you could kind of get the sense that it's like, oh, they're trying to work up the courage. They're trying to
Yeah.
work up the courage to come ask me something. And then, inevitably one of them would kind of come running over very, very shyly and, ask if it would be okay if they could get a picture, right? They'd hold up the camera and either pantomime it or use a little bit of English. Um, and, it's like, oh yeah, yeah. And like I'd made a point to just learn some super basic survival phrases before I went, because this was the first time I'd gone and I didn't know any Japanese before then. So, I'd be like, oh yeah, daijoubu, daijoubu. It's okay. And, uh, they so then you'd get them like posing next to you and they'd hand the camera back to whoever they were with so that that person could take a picture of them. And inevitably, 57 other people would see that you stopped for a picture. And so you'd kind of, sounds weird to say this, but you'd look up like you
Yeah.
weren't already looking up, but you'd look away from the camera guy or whatever and see like, oh, there is now a line, and you would be stuck in place for a good, I don't know, 30 minutes. Like, okay, like everybody's getting pictures, and you'd finally maybe like peel off of that one line. And about, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes later, it was just rinse and repeat. But I mean, it was so great because they were all so excited. It was such a cool experience to, kind of, I guess, make those bonds, if you will, between the two countries. It just felt like a once in a lifetime experience. It felt very rewarding. And just watching, like, like when they'd get that picture and they'd finish it and they'd run off and you'd hear them go, Yatta! Like, yay, I did it. Like, it's like, oh, man, like, this is awesome. This is awesome. So it was just very cool.
I like it, my friend, because it's and like you are the event at that time. And kudos to the people in charge for picking Japan and being, like right coming up with some way to where like, yeah, we need to go do this. Like, man, I'm surprised.
Yeah, it was
That's
definitely one of those experiences where it was like, "Are you really working?" And I will say, like, we absolutely, we got value out of it. It was good to be there, and definitely us being there helped, just with the security overall on the base. But, from a personal perspective, if you ask Justin, did you work? It's that cheesy adage of, do what you love and you never work a day in your life. Like, no, I didn't work at all. I hung out with Japanese people. They wanted to take pictures with me.
yeah.
Apparently being 6 feet tall and about 200 pounds makes them think that I'm some sort of glorious green giant. It's like, no, it was just awesome. Like, I loved every moment of it. They,
I said, no,
yeah.
that's great. That's great. And like when you were there, you said like for it was 2 days that the show was, and you said that's like either like a week or 2 weeks worth of your time. What else were you doing, around that air show portion of times?
Yeah. So because we had gone during COVID, there were all these precautions in place. So we needed to arrive, if I recall correctly, like 2 days
Yeah,
beforehand. We had to test before we left.
quarantine.
We had to basically like, and that was actually one of my jobs at the time as the first sergeant, was like everyone had to go and test, and it was my job to, ensure that they had done that and get like copies of all their testing paperwork. And then, we test before we left. We test again when we got there. We tested for the first few days we were there. We tested every morning. We would go over to the medical facility and test just to make sure like nobody brought COVID with them. And we were quarantined to not being able to leave the base because, we didn't want to be introducing COVID to the Japanese populace and spreading it anymore. And so that was kind of the first few days. And then the few days after that, we kind of like got spun up on like learning the lay of the land, for that base where everything's at. So we know like when we go to work, like, okay, where's the police station? Where do I need to go if we have some sort of medical emergency? Where is the secondary gate? If somebody calls over the radio and says they have an issue at the secondary gate, so I know how to get there. All that kind of stuff, right? And then we just did in between, we have like just our regular training tasks that we always have to do, right? Just as part of staying up to speed on everything. And so we just did a little bit of that as well, where it's just like, we can do this here while we're here to help kind of fill out the time, a little before the air show and a little bit after it. And then obviously, worked the air show, which those were 2 very full days. And then we had a couple of free days after that where we could kind of go do whatever we wanted. But for the most part, because of obviously being there to work and because of the quarantine situation, we had to come back to the base every night. So we couldn't get too far away. It was basically kind of like having a leash or a tether that kept you from getting too far away from the base just because of the time constraints, right? Like, you've been to Tokyo, so like, especially if the base is on the outskirts of Tokyo. And so, yes, the trains in Japan are phenomenal. However, you're probably not going to ride the Shinkansen from the outskirts of Tokyo to the central part of Tokyo. That's just not a Shinkansen ride. So you're going to take like the local JR line. And with the amount of stops and everything that you need to make between, it's like, okay, it's going to be like a good hour and, 15 minutes or so, depending on what time of day you are hopping on the train, especially if it's rush hour, before you get from the outskirts of Western Japan to, Shibuya or wherever
Yeah.
it is you're trying to get to. So it still eats away at your day. So
No, I like it, my friend. And I know, like you said, you've been back, you know, few different times as well and kind of hit upon being able to go back post COVID. Do you have any highlights? I know it's kind of like, asking to pick a favorite child, but like, do you have any like, highlights or things that kind of stand out to you from those trips where you're able to return and have those restrictions that are easy to forget about, as time goes on, but were very rare, real at the time?
yeah, for sure I do. I almost like it, not to be presumptuous, but if we end up talking again, I almost just don't want to share them just because I don't want to spoil them for next time.
Justin, I think that's a good idea. I think like yeah, yeah, try it, yes.
But that said, I'm happy to talk about them, all day long, every day. So, everyone can just suffer through it more than once, I guess. No, I think, man, I've just so many, like almost all of them probably are going to involve like the Japanese people themselves. From the first trip, this is kind of goofy, but when we were working the air show, one of my counterparts, we needed to move one of the aircraft from the ramp. And in order to move the aircraft, you got to get like a little tractor, if you will, that comes out and, pulls it down the runway because we don't want to run the engine up. Obviously, there's people there. Um, and so, we're trying to get this jet turned around so that they can move it because it's going to be part of the air show. But of course, it's got all these Japanese people around it who are wanting to take pictures of it. And my counterpart, who didn't speak any Japanese, was actually the one that was dealing with this particular situation. And uh, she's got all these Japanese people around this plane, and they're trying to back him up. And they're not quite, because nobody speaks Japanese. No, U.S. personnel speak Japanese. They're trying to figure out how to get these people away from the aircraft. And my counterpart looks at all of them and goes, okay, like, says back up a couple times, figures out it's not working and kind of goes, okay. And looks at all of them, puts her hands up and starts pushing outward, right? Like back up, back up. And at the same time she does that, she goes, beep, beep, beep. And like they all, like you can see them all going, like the recognition dawns, and they all, like as a group, they all kind of like laugh and then back up. And the actual base commander was out there with her at the time, and he he was like, that is amazing, how did you know to do that? And this is one of those like kind of cool things as like a reservist in the military, where it's like you bring your life experience that uh, you wouldn't necessarily think is going to be beneficial. And at the time, she was working as a school bus driver. So she just goes, I, I'm a school bus driver. I work with kids every day. So like it's like I just know how to get through to somebody when they aren't quite understanding what I'm saying. So yeah, it was pretty cool. He was very impressed with her for that, which is in the military. It's always
Good thing.
a big deal when you can put a feather in your cap where it's like, oh, the base commander recognized a thing I did. Even something that's as silly as that, because it's like it's just showing like, hey, like in a potentially high pressure situation, I can think outside of the box and de-escalate this and figure out how to get it solved. So even though I wasn't there, I love that story.
I love
Um,
I love it, my friend. I said, do you and I know we'll save some of like your trip talks and things like that as
Yeah, I
well,
mean,
my friend.
I definitely have stories of like meeting some locals, meeting some non-locals who I still keep in touch with, that I probably would not have met in any other circumstance. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely have a lot of good memories from Japan.
Excellent, my friend. And I know both of us are kind of fortunate living in the areas that we do. Like one of the questions I had on our list was just, do you have any Japanese festivals that take place in your area, or type of community that you have there in Kansas City?
I do, yeah. We're a smaller city, so what we have is probably not as large scale as like what you would get, obviously, in like the big three in the U.S., right? Where you are, Chicago, New York, L.A. But we do have a pretty active Asian Pacific Islander community here, and the nice thing about that then is obviously they're putting on festivals and trying to share their culture, and always happy to be doing that. We have one I had just come from a week or two ago at the junior college where I'm taking Japanese, the Kansas City Japan Festival, and it takes over the entire campus. Every building has something in it. There are all kinds of talks, food, performances, all kinds of stuff, some vendors and stuff there too. I wish I had planned my time better. There were a bunch of talks there on stuff like Japanese monster movies like Godzilla in America. There was a talk on Japanese game shows where it's just stuff like that is, you know, I love bonsai.
Yeah.
I love, whatever, the calligraphy. I think all that stuff is beautiful, but it's like, what? You're gonna talk about crazy Japanese game shows? Like, okay, now you're speaking my language because
Yeah.
I'm a huge dork. If something is inadvertently funny,
Yeah.
that's kind of my humor sweet spot. So, like, remember MXC when that show used to be on?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, that old Takashi's Castle.
It's
It's just
it's
so
great.
yeah, it's so crazy and so goofy that's like only the Japanese would think to do something just this silly. So yeah, I really regret having missed out on that talk. That would have been cool. But yeah, that's obviously that's the one big festival. We've got a couple others that just like smaller local groups put on. We've got a group called Yukari KC. They just did a summer festival at the farmers market here near where I live. And then, just kind of the obvious stuff that I think happens at a lot of places like the Planet Anime type stuff, which is it's cool if it's your speed. It's not really for me. I have nothing against it, but it's a little too surface level and I like to go a little bit deeper.
Yeah. And I know we've talked, for our time on Instagram, kind of going back and forth, and I've always said that after I'm there, there's always going to be a room open for past guests and friends of the show, and just just friends for you, Justin. But do you
Uh,
ever have like a plan to move to Japan full time?
well, when I'm not abusing your invite, I don't think full time. I would love to spend as much time there as possible. I'm very fortunate that the job I have right now is a work from home position. So in my head, I'm kind of constantly telling myself that there is a point at which once my youngest is maybe not moved out, but is old enough to be on her own, that, I would love to do the digital nomad thing there and spend 3 to 6 months. I think 6 months, my wife would probably kill me. I'm still trying to sell her on going to Japan with me, but I think I can get her on 3. And
Yeah,
if I can get her on the initial visit, then I can get her on 3. And if I can get
yeah,
her on 3, maybe I can
me,
get her to go longer. But
yeah,
um having been it's there's a little bit of like, I guess, pragmaticism, right? That's a big word.
yeah, yeah,
Where, like, having been on a lot of military trips and to places that are awesome, right? Places I
yeah,
would happily go back to at the drop of a hat, and getting to work with my active duty counterparts who, maybe have been stationed someplace for, 3, 4 years or whatever. There is also a level of like, as much as we sometimes complain about things like traffic or whatever it is we love to complain about, you realize too that like, okay, there's a comfort level to what I'm familiar with as an American, or, for listeners, like what you might be familiar with as, I don't pick your flavor, right? As a
yeah,
German, as an Italian, where it's like when you get out of that, it's like it's great for a while. And for some people, it stays great. And for other people, it's like, okay, I want to go back to my comfort zone and reset. And then I'll come back again, but I want to go back to my comfort zone and reset. And I think that the reality is for where I'm at in life and for my wife, just where we're at together, like probably we would need those resets. So
yep, yep. No, I completely understand too. With that, and it's like I can see that too. Like where my parents before they were out in Arizona for a while, and they're my mom and they're like, was from Chicago, but the my dad stuff, they'd come back every summer and they'd have like a couple months of time where they would come back, and that was kind of like their reset before heading back to Arizona different than Japan, don't get me wrong, but like back to where they were, and enjoying kind of the retirement and things like that. Now they're back more full time and they're out in Japan for a couple months. So nice having them back in the area. So that's always a possibility for stuff too. But I can get it. Like, and that's where I feel like in that same vein of things where it's like I could see me being there, and then if my daughter decides not to move to Japan or my son decides to live in Japan for a bit, of having them to go visit, kind of like my dad and mom did, where it'd be like, hey, see you for a month or two, whatever. Like I'll be in the area, and then yeah, pop back. So I can make you appreciate what you have when you get back.
Yeah, yeah, well, and it keeps, like, the mystery and the magic of Japan feeling like
Yeah.
the mystery and the magic of Japan, so, yeah, I mean, I don't know what my personal time limit would be in some hypothetical scenario where I didn't have, either other people in my life or other commitments or whatever they may be that I felt would pull me back, but I do think just like I said, having traveled a decent amount with the military, it's like, just a reset might just help remind me to appreciate being there.
'Cause yeah, I mean, like, you're 100%, like, if you're living somewhere, that's where you're living, and if you're working, that's where you're working, and then it becomes, your life, like, that's just what it is and where you're at, so, I'm working on I'm trying to make as many contacts as I can because I'd like to have, as many people be able to visit, plus as many people as I can to contact with when I go over there, so I kinda have that same thing, so it's
Yeah.
perfect, my friend, perfect. We're kind of inching our way here. We're doing real well on time. So I just wanted to kind of say like get the back to Japan portion of things, and just if you'd like to share any favorite movies, books, things like that that you'd like to share, be it the YouTube's podcast and stuff.
Yeah. Well, gosh, starting with movies, I just watched one of your favorite recommendations the other day. We were talking about that, Baby Assassins, which was
That's
it's fun. It's fun.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Definitely had its moments. I actually watched one just like this is the point I'm at in life. I can almost never sit through a movie and watch it in its entirety in one go. I either have to get up and like walk my dogs or do something else. But so I started on Friday and finished yesterday. Bon Bon Vampire. Have you heard of that one?
No, 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 no. I said I have to check that.
I think if you like Baby Assassins, you'll like it. Uh it's a movie, as the title might suggest, it is a movie about a vampire. He ends up living with this family. The other main character is a young man who's in high school who is, after like kind of the movie opens up with this fight scene and the vampire is basically rescued by this kid. And so he's like, "Oh, this kid's so pure and so innocent." And he's like, it's a dark comedy. He's like, "This kid's so pure, so innocent. Like, I really want to suck his blood. He is gonna have really good blood." So it's but like the whole premise too is like not until he's like 18 or whatever, and so he's like living with them, waiting for this kid to turn a certain age so that he can basically kill him and get the best meal out of him. And it's just like I said, a dark comedy in the meantime, so it's pretty fun. It's got, I would argue, maybe a little bit of something for everybody. It's got some musical numbers in it. Don't let that. It opens with a musical number. If musicals aren't your thing, don't let that throw you off because it like once it's through that it kind of turns back into a regular movie. There is like one or two other songs in there, but it's not the entirety of the movie by any means. It's got the love story, love interest portion of it going on, and then the comedy and like the action. So it's goofy. It's a silly movie, but it's fun to check out. Um, there is obviously I can't speak to how good or not good it's going to be, but there's a movie coming out called Family Man.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
going to
I
be in
remember
theaters.
seeing the
Brendan
trailers. Yeah,
Fraser.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, Honestly, that movie is the type of movie that's probably more my speed. I really just like the kind of like everyday life Japan type stuff.
Yes.
So I'm eager to see that because I don't know that it's informed by or inspired by, but there's a book that seems like that it's got a very similar story called Mr. Kato plays family. It is a Japanese book, but obviously you can get it in English. I do not read kanji. And it is about this elderly guy who was experiencing some life dissatisfaction with like just things in general. And he is, through circumstance, discovered by this talent agency that's like, hey, would you be willing to play a family member for our company and like basically be like a rent a dad type of thing. And so it's that's a kind of an interesting book, and this movie looks like it is kind of following that similar concept. So I'm eager to see it. Uh, and yeah, books. I've read a couple by Japanese authors, but they're just uh, they're just novels, right? So, they're by Japanese authors, they're kinda set in Japan. I would assume then that obviously probably informs the story to some point, but it's not like you're reading a book
Yeah.
specifically about Japan, right? Does that make
Yeah.
sense if I
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So The Miracles of the Namiya General Store is kind of an interesting book. It's about this band of, like, hooligans, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, who hole up in a general store for the night because 'cause they're hiding after they've done a heist, and, the general store ends up being sort of a what do you wanna call it? Like a go-between between 2 time frames, like I don't even remember, the early 1980s and current day, and so they're in there, kinda laying low as these letters keep arriving that are from the past, and then they're writing back to the past. Um, for anybody who wants maybe like a romance book, there's a book called Water Moon that I read that, has an interesting setting to it. And it involves like yokai and that kind of stuff. So I guess like it's got like a little bit of like tension in it as well. It's not just all romance. And then listeners probably have seen this or heard of this guy because he's on Instagram. But there's a influencer named Kyoto Ka. He's this like Japanese historian, and he has written a series of books that you can just pick up off of Amazon. I've only read one so far, but it's called Underdogs of Japanese History. A super quick, short read, punchy little anecdotal stories. So it's kind of fun because it gives you, it gives you some informational stuff that's entertaining, but it also doesn't feel like you're doing homework because they're very short. And yeah, like as far as like the more educational stuff goes, YouTube, I listen to a channel called Speak Japanese Naturally, and it is just a woman walking around doing her daily routine and speaking very slowly and clearly in Japanese, so you can kind of listen to it for comprehension. I'm, again, because I'm going to school for Japanese, like kind of nerd out about that kind of stuff and try to sharpen my skills as much as possible. And if you're just getting ready to go to Japan, or if you think you might be interested in learning the language, obviously, Mike, you have, all of your resources and people you've spoken to who are probably better than anything I've got, right? Because the stuff I've done has all been, with the exception of school, has been stuff I can find for free. But there's a podcast called Japanese Made Easy. It's by an English speaker, native English speaker. He introduces the language in sort of a Japanglish kind of way, right? Where he'll essentially throw an English sentence at you and then interject Japanese words into it. So you kind of get the gist of, oh, I understand what he's talking about, and now I know the Japanese word for it. So that was the one that I kind of cut my teeth on when I was trying to learn very introductory Japanese for my first trip. So, I had a couple things I needed to know before I went, that survival phrases. And it was, is this the right train? And, where's the bathroom? 'Cause like I will sleep in a gutter so long as my pants are clean.
That's
Like, so that was the one I really needed to know.
agree, my friend. Agree. That's thank you, Justin, so much for joining us today. I had a blast hanging out with you. Like I said, although not in person, it's at least not message by message. So thank you, my friend. And your transition, you're already practically after this hour, professional podcast person because you transitioned over nicely to what I was going to say next, which is uh, the Japanese Pro Master Class for verbs with Mape Lopo is in place and available to you at 70% off that retail price for just $60 through December 31st. After that time, it goes back to its $200 regular price. Like I said, I'm not getting anything from this except for the satisfaction of trying to help a couple and past guest of the show in getting great content out to you. And if they're successful, that's going to lead to them doing more, which I selfishly would take 100 times over. Have the support of a Discord community to help with your questions that you have through your studies, not just during your verb related time, but also going forward. And all of that can be seen at the link that's going to be in today's show notes, or just going directly to maple or mapelopo.com slash lost hyphen without hyphen Japan. Like I said, I'll have that link. But if you follow that, you get the $60 as opposed to $200. So begin your transformation today. Do something for you. As we're talking before the show, don't be like, me and, like once in a while, it is nice to do some things for yourself. So take care of that, my friends. And then, for those that, kind of had times with us, thank you again just for coming through. Our episodes coming up are going to be our Okinawa's is going to be transitioning to Tokyo. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do, Justin, with the Okinawa Popeyes magazine, if that's going to be just something that I'm going to put online and see if I raffle off to some sort of followers, because I'm trying to get the show to 300, or not 300, yes, 300, but 1,000 eventually. Because once we get back to 1,000, I can go back to going live on Instagram because they took that option away. In the past, whenever I had bands that would come to Chicago, I would like to go live and share like the performance and things, or just go live and kind of interact with you more. So if you are listening and have a moment of your day, I would really appreciate you just heading over and following the show at Lost Without Japan and help us go through. I've been really active lately, trying to make daily posts, putting out some content that would normally be just podcast into a smaller form where I'll talk about like one resort, one place to visit to eat, one place to visit for upcoming shows. And so there's a lot that's going on there that you can see before podcast form. So, I would appreciate it. And after that, we'll bring our show for today to the end. But thank you again, Justin, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. It was fun. I hope we can do it again.
No doubt about it, my friend. I said, we'll talk about a good times or something else that we could have you on to hang out again, because it can never happen enough. So,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And, peek behind the curtain maybe later in the day. That way the two of us can have a drink and not feel like it's problematic.
yeah, believe me, the non-Japanese portion of the show, if you watched Peaky Blinders, I've been watching The House of Guinness, so that led to me purchasing some as well. So that's a definite not said anywhere else yet first. So, so So, on behalf of Lost Without Japan and its entire crew, I'd like to thank you for joining us today for this interview. We really do look forward to seeing you on board again for our next regularly scheduled episode as we continue our discussion on Japan, travel, culture, and your lost without moments. To everyone out there, O Genki Day, stay well, my friends.